Rise and shine, Mr. Freeman. Rise and shine. Not that I wish to imply you have been sleeping on the job.
Well, happy
No one is
15th
more
birthday to
deserving
Half-Life
of
2.
the best, and
Well, Half-Life
all
1
the
started
effort
it
in
all.
the
Half-Life 2
world
really
would have
elevated the
gone
series to
waste
new heights in various
until-
ways. While Episode 1
Well,
released on the 1st of June and
let's
Episode
just
2
say
released on the
you're
10th of
outright
October, I'm going to
on
include
the
both of them in
end.
this review for the sake of convenience. The question is, just exactly how well does Valve's flagship first-person shooter stack up?
Right man in the wrong place can make all the difference in the world.
Being the second game, it carries over many things from the first one. Much like Half-Life 1, you've got a crowbar, pistol, magnum, submachine gun, shotgun, crossbow, grenade, and rocket launcher all as part of your arsenal. However, the rest of the weapons from Half-Life 1 aren't included here. In their place, however, you'll find the bug bait, a pulse rifle, and of course the iconic gravity gun. The gravity gun was obviously made to take advantage of the new physics engine that Valve created specifically for this game, and even now the ragdoll and material-based physics are quite a sight to behold. The gravity gun's even strong enough to knock back cars, although you can't quite pick them up like you can with smaller objects. Most of the weapons are pretty standard fare, but some of them have secondary functions, such as the machine gun with a grenade launcher, and you can also fire a vaporizing shot with a pulse rifle. Of course, sometimes you just want to get back to basics, and the shotgun's ult fire doubles the punch and the cost a greater spread, akin to the super shotgun from Doom. The bug bait is a special kind of tool that allows you to turn the ant lions in the game from your enemies into your own personal army, and it really comes in handy in taking out the Combine later on in the game. Enemies, of course, include the aforementioned Combine and ant lions, but head crabs, zombies, and barnacles return from the previous game, and they're about as pleasant to deal with as ever. The barnacles, of course, will try to latch onto you with their long tongues, but they're easy to deal with as long as you've got some kind of ammo left, and the zombies vary from normal, fast, poison, and Combine. With the exception of the Combine, the head crabs also come in those same variants. For obvious reasons, the poison ones are the biggest threat by far. The zombie host essentially just throws them at you, and while they're a bit slow, they instantly reduce your health to 1 freaking point. Thankfully, your suit will restore most of it by injecting you with an antidote, but that is seriously dangerous when you've got other enemies in the area. Combine are mostly standard fare soldiers, and they come in fully automatic and shotgun variants in addition to being armed with grenades. Occasionally, you'll have a sniper to deal with, so be aware of laser sights and always throw a grenade at them when you can. There are also gunships you have to shoot down with rockets, and they will actually target your rockets, forcing you to guide them around its fire to sink a shot on it. Presumably, it started out as a glitch, and they decided to keep it. Striders are big spider-like Goliaths armed with a machine gun and sometimes an energy cannon. These you have to immediately take down, although one cool thing near the end of Episode 2 is you get an explosive you can latch onto them and shoot it to instantly destroy them. It's still not the easiest thing in the world to do since you have to plant it onto them, but it's still pretty satisfying to blow them up. Basically, there's plenty of variety in terms of the types of enemies you'll be facing, and thankfully each area tends to be pretty thematic as to which ones you'll face. Some levels even have turrets that you have to knock over. If you've ever played Portal, this was basically the inspiration for its turrets, and they basically act the same way here, minus the funny dialogue, of course. Much like the first Half-Life, the game is fairly on the linear side, with it largely being straightforward. Sometimes there are puzzles, especially physics puzzles, because Valve just really loves showing off, or basically arena fights to break things up. At one point in Episode 2, you're even trapped between 2 shields as an ambush, and you have to duck into the nearby house to face the attacking Combine. You'll also get a couple of vehicles in the forms of a boat and a car, both of which handle more or less the same and sometimes have a weapon for you to fire off of them. The real highlight moment from a gameplay perspective, at least to me, is when you're deep into the Citadel in the base game and near the beginning of Episode 1. A weapon confiscator fries all of your equipment, but actually charges up your gravity gun by mistake. With this newfound upgrade, you can actually pick up and throw enemies, or just fire lightning bolts at them. Either action pretty much results in them vaporizing, and it's pretty satisfying to just go around making sport out of the Combine like you're a vengeful little deity. Returning from the previous game is a health and armor system, both of which can be replenished using health pickups or just using the Combine's health stations. One amusing thing is that in Episode 2 you can step on grubs to restore your health. You can also just step on them because it's fun to do, and also screw antlions. You get an achievement if you manage to crush every single one, but they're not the easiest to find, so I didn't get that one. Perhaps the biggest nitpick, the one aspect that's aged the poorest, is the way it handles map chunks. Unlike more open-ended games that stream in data, Half-Life 2 has chunks of spaces that load as you get close to them, meaning you'll be seeing loading times a lot. Thankfully, on vanilla, those loading screens are virtually nothing nowadays, so it's a minor inconvenience at best. Overall, the gameplay is very satisfying and has the classic FPS tropes of static health and limited weapon capacity and not necessarily being forced forward. Granted, it also has the modern tropes of limited sprint, the action will slow down at times for plot, and it's fairly linear, so it's kind of like a nexus between classic and new FPS. At least it handles that balance a lot better than Duke Nukem Forever ended up doing, but that's not really saying a lot, is it?
When you see your father, relay these words. Prepare for unforeseen consequences.
As you can expect with a numerical game like this, the game is a straight sequel to Half-Life 1. After dealing with things the first time, it seems the G-Man's choice at the end of the first game didn't really matter because he acts as if you willingly went along with him. He actually hangs a big ol' lampshade near the end of the base game as he talks about the illusion of choice.
Rather than offer you the illusion of free choice, I will take the liberty of choosing for you.
In any case, you find yourself in City 17 and you have no idea what you're doing there. After making your way through the local Combine police forces, you run into Barney, apparently one of the many identical security guards who knew Gordon and disguised himself as a Combine to sort of smuggle you away and prevent you from riding the train to Nova Prospect, the high-security Combine prison. To that end, Gordon must head off to see Dr. Kleiner, one of the identical sets of scientists from Black Mesa, but along the way he's beaten down with Combine baton sticks. Luckily, a badass new character introduces herself, and her name is Alex Vance. She manages to fight them off for you and guide you the rest of the way to see Dr. Kleiner. After getting his trademark suit back, Alex and Gordon are supposed to teleport to Eli, Alex's dad, who was also from Black Mesa. Unfortunately, things don't go quite according to plan, as Lamar, Kleiner's deep-beaked headcrab pet that he keeps around for some reason, interferes with the teleporter, and Gordon is brought all over the place from the alien planet in the previous game to the main antagonist Breen's own office. Thankfully, you manage to stabilize and land right outside where you started. Not exactly anywhere close to Eli, or Alex for that matter, who actually did manage to successfully teleport. Guess you'll just have to make it on foot, but at least you're still in one piece from the teleporter, and at least Barney was nice enough to throw you back your old crowbar. After beating down a Combine guard who was abusing a citizen and then grabbing a gun from the one next to him, Gordon is on his way. From here on out, the Combine recognize he's a threat and will shoot him on sight rather than just beat him with their baton sticks. Along the way, he manages to grab a boat and make his way to Eli's place where he reunites with Alex. Alex shows him a nifty little toy called the 0-point energy field manipulator, or for those less nerdy, you can just call it the gravity gun. To that end, Gordon must travel through Ravenholm, which is full of Combine zombies, and a seemingly friendly priest with a shotgun. Thankfully, he defies the expected horror tropes and doesn't actually betray you. He is a little eccentric though, although I guess when you spend all your time with zombies, you're gonna be. After dealing with that, you head through the highway and sand traps, getting a car and dealing with the local antlion population until you get the bug bait and make them your allies. It's funny how the Thumper is designed to keep the antlions away turn from being your best friend into your worst enemy. So eventually Gordon does make it to Nova Prospect, where there's heavy Combine resistance you have to fight your way through. After yet another teleporter goes wrong, Gordon's back in City 17 and has to fight his way to the Citadel, after which you have to stop Breen from escaping through a portal. Both because he'll get away and because the radiation from the portal will be slightly lethal, even to Gordon. After Dr. Breen is subsequently killed from the damage caused and G-Man decides to save Gordon and Alex from the ensuing explosion, it's off to Episode 1. Episode 1 basically involves the fallout from the first game, where you and Alex must get the hell out of Dodge before the Citadel blows up, along the way delaying its explosion and guiding other people to the trains before getting on themselves. Along the way, you reunite with Barney and some other Resistance fighters. The Citadel finally does blow up as they make their escape, leading into Episode 2. Alex managed to retrieve data from the Citadel and the Combine really want it back. Tragically, they want it back so badly that Alex is critically injured by a hunter right as Episode 2 begins and has to be healed by the Vortigaunt, who were enemies in the first game but have been helping Gordon throughout the entirety of the second. After acquiring larval extract from the antlions and the Vortigaunt are attempting to save Alex, the G-Man makes another appearance and actually saves her, although he and the Vortigaunt appear to be on opposing sides and he appears to be using Alex for his own ends. I do really like how the game leaves it up in the air on how virtuous the G-Man's intentions actually are. He really gives me a Q from Star Trek kind of vibe, since he's clearly very powerful but restricted in what he's allowed to do. In any case, you then have to make your way to White Forest and deal with possibly the most annoying scientist in the Half-Life series, and possibly any game that Valve has ever made. I speak, of course, of the Magnuson. He's got an ego and is constantly complaining, but on the plus side, you get to race Dog, Alex's robotic companion, right before you get to the base. Sadly, Episode 2 ends on a huge cliffhanger. After fending off Striders to keep them away from the base, a major character dies at the hands of a Combine advisor, extremely powerful beings with psychic abilities, one of which they actually had a close encounter with earlier before being chased off by Dog. Then it just cuts to black and that's it. Honestly, that's the biggest tragedy out of all of this. It's been over 12 years since Episode 2 released, and there still isn't any Episode 3, let alone the dead meme that is Half-Life 3. I understand if Half-Life 3 can't ever work, but it would at least be nice to have an actual Episode 3 just to tie things up. Given the original people who worked on Half-Life almost all left Valve by now, I won't be holding my breath. It just feels so inconclusive, especially since both the advisors get away with one seemingly only minorly wounded. We still don't know what G-Man ultimately wants, what's going to happen from here, or anything like that. Eli mentions a powerful boat called the Borealis that must be destroyed and that it ties to Portal 2, but there's no conclusion there. All we have is an outline of how the story was supposed to go, and a modder sort of attempting to recreate it. To put it simply, the plot is very good and the characters are quite compelling. Honestly, that's why it stings so much that it ends without a payoff. Gordon fits the role of mute protagonist very well. Alex is badass in a genuinely likable way. The Vortigaunt have this delightful lack of emotion reminiscent of Star Trek's Vulcans, and G-Man makes a great wildcard character. Just keep in mind that the ending is abrupt and incomplete, and maybe read through the planned script or even check out the mod if you want some kind of idea of how it was supposed to end. Next to the physics engine, perhaps the biggest evolution Half-Life 2 has to offer is its visuals. The human faces continue to be some of the most expressive and lifelike I've ever seen in a game, and the shader effects really help it age well. Yeah, the textures and models are very low res, but keep in mind this game released in 2004 and is 15 years old. The fact that it still holds up as well as it does is nothing short of a miracle. You might have noticed that the footage of the base game is very noticeably different from the footage of the two episodes, and that's because I used the cinematic mod for it when I played through it before switching to vanilla for Episode 1 and Episode 2, because the cinematic mod was causing the game to become highly unstable. I had to waste far too much time loading it back in because it would freeze quite a bit, and ain't nobody got time for that! Even in vanilla, however, the game is quite a treat to look at when you consider just how old it is. With some better textures and maybe some extra polygons, I think it could legitimately pass for a modern game. I seriously think it looks that good. The voice acting is also quite nice to listen to in my opinion. Between the very good looking facial expressions and the voice dialogue, you really get a feel for the characters as mentioned prior in the review. When a character is hitting the pinnacle of despair, it's like a gut punch, and the game definitely holds no punches a lot of the time, as this world is quite a hellish place. Naturally, Gordon himself is still a silent protagonist, and Alex and others tend to speak for him a lot. However, Gordon's suit does still have a voice, and is constantly reminding you of things like if you've taken damage or what kind of damage you've taken. It can be borderline Navi levels of annoying at times, but it can be helpful to determine exactly what hurts you. The music can also get really intense at times, and a highlight in my opinion is the music that plays when you're fending off antlions coming in through multiple tunnels, the climactic moment when every tunnel is lit up and you have to go in guns blazing. It really adds a lot to the adrenaline rush you're most likely feeling as you desperately try to hold them off along with the Resistance fighters and the Vortigaunt. The only character that I'd say is uncanny is clearly meant that way deliberately. You can tell by his facial expressions and tone of voice that G-Man isn't human and is doing his best to try to present himself as human. It can be very unsettling when he shows up and you can't even be entirely sure if he's your ally or not. As I believe I've mentioned before, I choose to believe he's a little like Q from Star Trek. He ultimately wants humanity's best interest, but that might not be necessarily aligned with your goals. The zombies actually sound pretty disturbing, especially if you play some of their lines in reverse. Help me! It actually makes me feel sorry for them, almost like the host is consciously aware of their actions but can't stop themselves. Basically, the presentation is excellent and probably aged even better than the gameplay has. There's also the option of the cinematic mod if you want the game to look even better and have even more of an artistic flair, but even the vanilla is very good to look at, and at worst, it's at least tolerable for most people. The anti-aliasing and anisotropic filtering probably also help. Half-Life 2 is considered by many to be one of the best games of all time, a real milestone in gaming history. I'm pleased to say for all 2% of you who somehow didn't know already, it more than deserves its reputation. It's certainly not perfect, it's a very linear game and it has a very unsatisfying cliffhanger ending, get on that Valve, but it still stands the test of time and I would highly recommend the game in both episodes if you somehow haven't played it already. Nowadays it'll run on basically a toaster. You can even use console commands to make it run on something like a GeForce 2, which I know for a fact is extremely weak. Feel free to snag it on Steam if you like first-person shooters and are in the mood for a pretty good apocalypse story about a theoretical physicist with glasses and a goatee who's really good at smacking things down with a crowbar. This has been my review of Half-Life 2. Thank you for tuning in, and I'll see you next time.
So wake up, Mr. Freeman. Wake up and smell the ashes.